www.faketones.com.
How's it going, everybody? This is Dailies to Downloads. My name is Chad. With me is Eric. And our topic today came as a suggestion from Eric based on a article that you recommended about the best movies that take place during summer. So where can they find that article?
Yeah, so that is on the Film at Lincoln Center site. You could just, it was from last month. If you just Google, what was the title? We Beat the Heat. That's not
Yes.
bad because it's summer. It's hot. It's very humid. Your favorite summertime films, and yeah, I made sure to specify that. Normally, people say, "What are your favorite summer movies?" And that just means movies that came out in the summer. But we want to talk about movies that take place in the summer. And
Not
how that
necessarily summer blockbusters as we've come to know them,
right
because
exactly.
that could incorporate anything. But
Yeah.
what movies that take place during the summertime, and there are a lot of them. I will say right off the bat, we will not talk about each and every movie that people out there might think we should. We're just going to mention a handful of the ones that we like or that we think people should see. But by all means, if there are any that you think we should have mentioned or that you would just like to throw out there, please do so. But when it comes to, I was thinking about this just before we got on. When it comes to movies that take place during summer, I often think there's a lot of movies that are set within a camp or set within maybe just somebody moving to a new neighborhood, and they have to become acclimated to the new neighborhood and meeting new people and new kids or whatever, like a younger kid. There's a lot of movies like that, and those are the types of movies I think of when it comes to movies being set during summer.
Very a nostalgic
Right.
feeling to the season for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah. You're right.
Out, you're getting ready to go to school again in the fall.
Right.
Maybe going somewhere else, vacation, something happens.
People just kind of, hanging out with friends or wandering around and getting into trouble or, whatever the case may be. The plot might be loose. Certainly the plot of some of these movies like Adventureland and things like this, those plots are not intricate. They're just kind of about watching people at a job or watching people do whatever they do, hang out, basically. So let's start out with just kind of throwing out a question, which is, and I'll throw it to you, Eric, here first.
Sure.
What movie makes you think of summer the most?
I would probably say off the top of my head, I don't know if it's weird enough, but Do the Right Thing. Because that movie takes place over the course of a day, and it's the hottest day of the summer, and so that is a pretty big important factor in the movie. So that would be, and it's very orange filtered and shot. So I think of a summer overcast.
Yeah, he definitely, he being Spike Lee, there are quite a few of his movies that are set during the summer, and where that part is an important issue to the story, or certainly a background issue, in that heat makes people act a certain way or not act a certain way, what have you. But yeah, Do the Right Thing is certainly a classic. And I remember in that article, Crooklyn was mentioned as well. But for me, the movie that I would think about pretty much right away and that I rewatch on occasion would be The Sandlot. Because to me, and when you were talking about the nostalgia factor, certainly that movie is kind of steeped in nostalgia, and it captures a lot of the things that I love about summer and that I wish were still a thing. And I'm going to sound like an old man here in a second, but it is what it is. When it comes to kids being outside, playing baseball, getting into trouble, and, just enjoying the heat going to the swimming pool, flirting with girls, all that kind of stuff, is, your typical summer trademarks. And, that movie is really, really well done about what it's like to be a kid, and what it's like to be a kid in a new area, certainly. And it really captures that era really well. And in a way, I think it's timeless, even though it's set in a very specific period, just based on the fact that what it's like to be a kid and playing baseball, all that kind of stuff is really, will never change, hopefully, too much, even though we live in an era where everybody's on a device of some sort.
Does it take place in the modern day? I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time since I've
Like
seen
it's
it.
like the 50s.
Oh, it takes place in the 50s. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, and and then, like we were talking, it's a kid that moved to the neighborhood for the first time. He's unathletic and doesn't have any friends, so
Yeah.
and that's just kind of how the plot picks up. And it's your basic family movie. And from what I understand, they're doing some sort of series or resurgence with some of the members of the original cast. I don't really know
Yeah.
I forget what the details are at this point, but
I
I
feel
know.
like there was a recent documentary about, like, I think a 30th cast
Right.
reunion sort of a thing. I think that was last year, maybe,
Yeah.
or around this time. I don't know. Yeah.
And just along those same lines, another movie that really stands out to me. And you know what? It takes place during summer. I don't really initially think of it as a summer movie, although that certainly is something I would think about after the fact, which is Stand by Me. And I view that movie more as a coming of age tale than I do a typical summer movie. But certainly these kids are out in the summertime, and it's the same sort of thing. It's a group of kids out. In this case, they're looking for the body of a dead kid, and but they're getting into trouble, and they're dealing with their family lives and all that sort of stuff. Really, really terrific movie. And again, takes place in a very specific period. But what it captures with regard to how these kids' home lives affect how they are as people, um, is an important thing, and something that will not change. Like that, I feel like people will always be able to relate to a lot of that on some level. Uh,
Yeah.
but
And I guess, yeah, even in those examples, in terms of nostalgic and thinking back, it seems like a lot of the summer films are also about a different era, literally, like a different decade or something, which is something I may not have picked up as a kid.
right,
When I saw, like, I don't want to jump the gun because I don't think we picked these, but like My Girl or Dirty Dancing, like, actually
yeah,
take in a different decade than which they were filmed. As a kid, it didn't register with me,
right.
but that's part of it. Yeah.
And you know what? That's an important thing, is that didn't register to you, and certainly it probably didn't register to me really either. Whereas I would be willing to bet that a lot of the movies that we see nowadays in 20, 30 years, kids will be able to register, oh, this movie is a little bit older, because the movies have become, and not to go off on a tangent, but the movies become just as much about what technology is being used, or what star power they have, or what have you, than it is about the themes and the characters necessarily. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases, I would say. Whereas the movies, some of the movies we mentioned, it is more about the characters than it is about what year it is.
Yeah.
Um, but so moving on, so Eric, what is a movie that you would recommend that you think more people should see that takes place during summer? Something that maybe people might not initially think of.
So for me, this was in just thinking of the topic, like, um, my mind also started just racing on, like you said, like, you thinking that a film takes place during the summer, primarily during the summer. So I was thinking of, like, what people are wearing, if it's like t-shirts or like people are sweating or whatever. So something
Right.
I thought back to is probably not commonly referenced in this way, but the original, or any of them, 12 Angry Men,
Right.
uh, because, and that's another one that takes place over a single day.
Mhm.
And because it's like also like the hottest day of the summer, for some reason, like, my mind keeps going back to that sort of like intense heat and sweat and that's like a powder keg for like tensions rising. And I guess I could also include, but I won't because it's based on a real story. Another Sidney Lumet film, Dog Day Afternoon, also a summer movie over a course of a day. Doesn't Not as much of a factor, but it is somewhat of a factor. People are sweating and it's hot and shit's hitting the
That's
fan.
one I need to watch again. I remember I watched it in college, and it was part of a class about hostage negotiations. So
Oh,
like I was
really?
kind of
Oh, wow.
in that mode at the time. But
Yeah,
I do need to watch that one again. But that is that's a good example as well.
yeah. I mean, I'll say 12 Angry Men just because it's not maybe probably typically not something you think of. But while you're watching it, you are so aware that like there's like one fan and how there's a baseball game that a guy's trying to get to. So he's trying to hurry up the coming to a verdict with the jurors. And then there's a downpour of rain because when it's very hot out, as we've been experiencing a lot here on the East Coast, the rain follows very quickly. So, but you never really see any exteriors. So it's kind of a
Right.
odd choice in that regard.
But
I thought
yeah,
that,
but
yeah,
certainly the heat and the tensions are a big factor in that one as well. And as you were talking about it, I was trying to think of the remakes and whether or not the heat was as much of a thing with the remakes. Certainly the one that the Russian
Russian
one
12,
is very
right?
long.
Yeah,
I don't remember the heat being a thing in that. As much as I liked that movie, and then there was the made for TV version as
yeah,
well, which I think was just basically a recreation of the original.
yeah.
So heat might have been a thing there. Um, but yeah, no, that's a good example, and that's a great movie as well. And every time I think of that movie now, I think about wishing that I could see the 12 Angry People on Broadway someday.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an easy. I saw a Broadway revival. I guess like I don't know, high school, 2000, yeah, sometime high school, and it's such an easy thing to put on in that regard.
Yeah,
12 act, 13 actors, I think, because there's that one person who's like administering everything.
right,
Um, and it's just kind of a bare stage, and there's a window, and you can kind of see outside, and it rains, et cetera, et cetera. But it's very simple to do.
right. Or 12 Angry Women, whatever the case. I would love to see
Yeah,
a different twist on it. I think that would be really fascinating because we've seen this done with men certainly. It would be interesting to see the nuances and how they would be different. But certainly those pop up every now and then. But
yeah, especially yeah for like high school drama too. Like if you have
yeah,
like class, it's you wouldn't do an all single sex production of if it doesn't necessarily call for it. Who knows? They
right.
mentioned doing a Glengarry Glen Ross women version, but it hadn't taken place. But
That would be that would be interesting too. I mean, but then
sure,
again, the salesman thing these days is
it would
certainly
have to
it's a different
change.
field.
Yeah, some things would have to be altered, but be
Yeah.
interesting.
Like it'd be great if they did a remake of that with women and like they incorporated ring cameras and like
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The modernized
I don't know
cover.
how. I don't know why that would even be a thing, but I don't know. I'll get to work on that right after this show.
I mean, I think even Glengarry might even be summer based, but don't quote me on that one. But yeah,
There's a lot of rain in that one, as I recall.
yeah, yeah.
Anywho, one that I definitely think people should see more of, and in the past few years, it has been released on Criterion, but it is not easy to find. Which is A Brighter Summer Day, which is from 1991 and directed by Edward Yang. And I reviewed this movie when we wrote for 411. I did a column called Nether Regions, which was about out of print movies, and this is one that I tackled. And it's a very long movie, but it's really really great. It's 237 minutes, and it is set in the late 50s and early 60s, and it's inspired by Edward Yang's memories of coverage of a teenager tried for killing his girlfriend. And so it centers on a character, Zhao Zir, a boy from a middle class home who veers into involvement with gangs and juvenile delinquency, and obviously is set during summer. And it's a really really great movie, very epic in nature, not just because of the length. And I highly recommend anything by Edward Yang, but this one definitely deserves more of an audience. His movies are very hard to find for a very long time, and you really had to search or go into some shady website territories
Yeah,
to,
I remember
find
when
them.
I think when you had the version that you had, however, I think from online or whatever. Like, didn't you have like the subtitles were like very fast?
Oh, that's right.
So, like,
Wow, that's
right?
funny. You
I remember
remember?
you mentioning that. Like, it was too fast to read. So yeah, it
Yeah,
was like yeah, whatever.
yeah. The subtitles were very, very fast, and the picture quality was not great. But through all that, the quality of the film did certainly shine through. And I think at some point in that article, this movie is mentioned. So that certainly reminded me. But yeah, I highly recommend checking that out if you're into foreign films. And along those lines, I liked what one person said in the article, where every Ozu movie felt like summer, which which is pretty true. uh,
Yeah,
I certainly haven't seen every single movie that he made, but a lot of them, certainly have that atmosphere to it, even
yeah,
if
and I
they don't explicitly say what season it is.
yeah. I feel like some filmmaker, Eric Romer was another one who, like a director
Right.
that kept being cited, where it's like certain directors have their particular interests or times of um even thinking of just doing production in summer, like I'm sure that's more ideal than doing it in winter or whatever, or like, but coming up with stories that are summer based as well.
Well, see, it's
Yeah,
interesting you mentioned, filming during summer, because that's really not an easy thing to manufacture if it's not actually summer. Like with winter, you can create snow,
yeah,
but with summer, I mean, having everybody look like they're sweating or appear hot, like that's a hard trick to pull off consistently throughout. So you kind of have to film during summer, which brings about its own challenges
yeah,
on a production.
absolutely.
Um, so let's
I
see.
have,
How about?
and I must say, I have not seen A Brighter Summer Day, so I don't. I still have not seen it all these years later. Even I've still not gotten to it. But
I did end up buying that on Criterion,
yeah,
and I haven't rewatched it since I bought it on Criterion, but I'll let you borrow it,
I'll
because
watch it. Yeah,
even though
it's been on my list for a decade. I got to
even
get
though it's
through
an
the.
undertaking. And you know what? On a side note, I still need to watch Showa, and I still have your book as well that you let me borrow. It's still in good condition.
Oh yeah, wow.
You're
That
just
was a
right.
long time ago. How long ago was that? I forgot
That
about
was
that.
it was years. It was definitely way pre-pandemic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just assumed it was lost it. I didn't realize.
Lost. Oh, no, I still have it. It's still in good condition. And one of these days, I will watch Showa and then read it. So,
Yeah. Um,
anywho,
you have a couple
this
of
is
years.
not about documentaries on
No.
concentration camps, but
I, another one I was thinking of, because also, what I realized with coming up with my own personal preferences, I feel like everyone has like different ideas of like what summer is to them as well. Like for me, going over the things I chose, I was never a kid that liked going to the beach.
right.
I a lot of people associate that with summer. Obviously, that was not my upbringing. I still don't like the beach. I don't do that.
But do you
But
like movies about the beach,
I mean,
or movies that take place at the beach?
I mean,
I'm not a big beach person either.
I
That's what
would
I
hope
meant.
I would hope to be open to them. I mean, but I'm trying to think of like, have there been some great ones? I mean, I'm sure there. I mean, I'm just thinking like everyone says Jaws, right?
I was
Everyone
gonna
says Jaws.
say, yeah, we haven't even mentioned Jaws, and people probably would have roasted us if we had not even mentioned it. But
It's like the
that's
go-to.
obviously the mainstream example of not only a summer blockbuster, but it is obviously set in the
Yeah,
summertime, and certainly Jaws is a classic. But it's not it didn't make any of my short lists here, simply because I think of other
yeah.
movies first. But
I mean, it's definitely a movie that relies on it being in the summer. Because if you had this killer shark and it was winter and nobody showed up to the beach, you wouldn't have. I mean, there'd be no conflict. They'd all be
right,
safe. You wouldn't have to worry about it. The mayor would get reelected, and then the whole thing would continue. But all that's to say that another one of my choices takes place pretty much indoors. It's sweating. Is Rear Window, which is another
right,
takes place in summer. It's all about heat and hot and being cooped up. and obviously because the man is also incapacitated, being in a wheelchair. But heat plays a big part of that, and because of that, all the neighbors and like the apartment complex are like out on their steps on the fire escapes and things like that, which makes the characters all visible, which plays a part when there's a murder that takes place, blah blah blah. And again, yeah, those kind of for me, being indoors and very hot, like even just thinking personally, like my family didn't have air conditioning like until I was a teenager, I would say.
Right.
We had like these portable fans and stuff. So like whenever I see movies, I guess that are from that era or take place in that era or whatever, like that kind of brings me back to just being very 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 hot
Right.
and things like that. So Rear Window is another one which probably not be brought up a lot for a summer story, but it definitely relies on taking place in the summer.
Absolutely. I mean, that's classic. That's easily one of my favorite movies of all time. And I remember watching it for the first time. I remember showing it to my wife for the first time. Because that's one of those movies you never forget, really. But I feel like Hitchcock is a filmmaker that's almost above certain qualities like that. Like you don't really think about his movies being set in any type of season. You just think, well, it's Hitchcock. So that's kind of what overrules everything. But certainly in that movie, it does rely on being at that time of year.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also a very short. I forgot how long the time period is, but it's not like a day, but it's
Right.
maybe a week, perhaps. Like it's a very short,
Yeah.
concentrated amount of time that plays into the increasing tension of the
Right.
season, if you will.
Um, Another movie that I covered in my nether regions out of print column was The Swimmer from 1968, starring Burt Lancaster. And again, that's a movie that's not easy to find. I don't even know to this day if that movie's been given a really quality release on DVD. I'm sure it has, but it's definitely worth watching. It's very very good. It's about a guy who tries to swim in all these different swimming pools to make it home, and yeah, it's one of his best performances. I highly recommend checking that out. Um, this show didn't really mean to be about all these movies that are hard to find, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's. I mean, I also feel like that's been on like TCM.
yeah, that's the
Really,
you can catch it on TCM. Absolutely, yeah,
yeah, so I feel like that's it's something I see talked about. I mean, I'm sure this is still pretty rare, but like people do really like it, and directed by
TCM's a great channel to check out some of these movies that were never given release, or maybe they're only available on you know the Warner archive
Archive.
type
Yeah,
thing where you have to order by it's by demand type thing. um but yeah.
yeah.
So
Direct,
is there a movie that you've watched that takes place during summer that you've watched the most? You might have already answered it with Do the Right Thing, because I know that you watch that movie a lot, but is there any movie that that takes place during this time where like, well, okay, I've seen that movie more than any other?
I would say, and even not so many times, but maybe Dazed and Confused.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um, which also feels like the ultimate summer movie in a sense because of all those kind of traits that we described about nostalgia and moving on and or not moving on and what that's kind of like what we say the doldrums of summer, the dog days of summer, blah blah blah, which is obviously not something I would have seen too young because it's not a kids movie at all. But in the past 15 years, I would say I've seen that at least 3 or 4 times, which is probably more than I revisit most. Um, but yeah, I think that would probably be mine. What about yourself?
Well, I mean, other than the Sandlot, I mean, that's probably the one that comes to mind the most. Simply because it's easy to watch. But um, the rest of the movies on my list are movies that I've seen maybe quite a few times, but you know, they don't really stand out as movies that I've seen like a ton of times, maybe.
Now I know what you did last summer. You don't watch it
Yeah,
every
I have seen that
week.
more than once. But yeah, like another one that I haven't mentioned here is E2 Mama Tambien.
Yeah.
That's certainly a good one. Um, a recent one would be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Um, that also takes place during summer. I'm actually listening to that novel right now.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, technically, was it in the first half like February,
it might be.
and then the second half is August, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
From what I recall, the big jump in time to get to the murders, etc. But yeah, I'll allow it. I'll allow it.
All
Uh, and also like when thinking about like potential titles, I also realized there's so many quote unquote classics in this genre that I haven't seen.
yeah, like
But
what?
I've never seen The Warriors,
Oh,
which is
really? Yeah, yeah. It's
never seen,
good.
which I think now I hear is kind of overrated, but I've just never seen it.
It's not great. It's it's okay for what it is. I mean, Walter Hill is
Mhm.
never been my favorite director, but I mean, certainly that movie has its place. Some people really like it a lot. I don't think it's like a classic by any stretch, but it's okay. It's worth
Yeah,
seeing simply to say you saw it. I would think at this point.
yeah. And I
Uh,
remember, and we talked about Space Jam in the previous episode, but I do remember in my youth, the Tiny Toons adventure, How I Spent My Summer
yep,
Vacation, which was, I think it was theatrically, I want to say it was theatrically released.
it might have been. Yeah,
Um, yeah, in like the early 90s,
they were
based
really
on,
popular.
yeah, 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 absolutely. That was my introduction to the whole Looney Tunes stuff. And with that, I had the VHS of that movie. That was probably like an hour. Um,
Come on, you still do. It's like right beside you right now, isn't
I mean, I used to keep it right next to my Showa book, but apparently not anymore now.
it? That's the double feature we all need. That's
I don't know where it is today. I can tell you.
I might have that too. Who knows? Um,
Yeah.
another one that I wanted to mention is The Talented Mr. Ripley, and I rewatched this one quite a few times over the years, and one of the things that spawned me rewatching it was I remember Kevin Smith really recommended it. He really thought that the script was really well done, and so based on one of his recommendations, I forget where it was that he was mentioning it at the time, but yeah, that's a very good movie, and it is certainly set in the summertime. Really beautiful European, Italian, you know, locales there, and the wardrobe really speaks to it being summertime in that movie. Like with you see the guys in these swimsuits and they're on the boat and all that kind of thing. It's always a beautiful day in that movie.
Polo, like is it polo shirts
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I
um,
think that's in a genre like Italian Summer, like Call Me by Your Name, and
yeah.
the new Pixar
Luca,
Luca. It's an Italian summer movie. I haven't seen it, but yeah,
Luca is very good. Very, very much a heartwarming movie. I would say it's worth watching, and certainly it's. I mean, hell, it's free on Disney Plus. So based
it
on
seems
that
like
alone,
a that's its own. Well, you've been to Italy in the summer, right?
I have. Yeah, that was
It, se-
that
it
was
seems like
our honeymoon spot was Italy, and I mean, yeah, it's a great place. I mean, one of the main reasons I wanted to go there was because of the history. Being a history buff, I really wanted to see all that Rome had to offer specifically.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's a great place to be
It
during the
definitely, yeah. That's a certain locale. Like I feel like New York is a big one for summer
yeah.
set things. Italy for
And you know what? It's one of those things, especially with New York, like when you were going back to do the right thing, like experiencing New York City in the summertime. Like, I mean, Spike Lee really captures that well.
yeah, yeah,
Just about like just the atmosphere alone. What you were talking about with the orangish type of
yeah.
view.
Yeah, and I guess like that sense of like everyone's like almost like on top of each other, living so close, or if you're on the
Right.
subway and all those kind of things factor in other ways where when I see something like American Graffiti, which is another one that takes place in a different era than it was made in,
Right.
right? I don't have as much of a relative experience, but it's just as valid, obviously.
Absolutely. Midsommar
Yeah, I guess so. It is
recently.
summer there. I mean, obviously, it's completely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true.
It's funny to me. Like I'm
It
in.
doesn't feel like a very hot movie, though, does it? Like,
No, not really. I mean, it's certainly not as much about the heat.
no, like they're wearing dresses and like
Yeah.
big stuff. But yeah, yeah, it is hot.
That's still a very polarizing movie. Like it's
That's
funny to
true.
me because like I'm in some movie groups on Facebook and I'm in some beer glass groups and there's like one that they make a beer glass of of Midsommar and every now and then people will be like, oh man, I finally saw this movie. How do anybody like it? Like it's just
Just based on the glass, so that's what made them watch the movie.
yeah because the
Really? Wow.
glass in this particular group the glass is very sought after.
Really?
Yeah, it's worth quite a bit of coin. Certainly north of $100.
Wow.
Um, yeah, yeah, just for one glass. Yep.
I
But
mean,
anyway,
that for that movie, it is a good sense. Like, we didn't even another giant genre is like the summer slasher movie,
yeah,
which we didn't even touch on because that's its own thing. Most are not great, obviously. Friday 13th being the main one, but then the sleepaway camps and the burning, and there are hundreds of slashers that take place in the
so,
summer.
so
Usually
many.
camp.
I really need to watch the sleepaway camp movies. I've not seen one. But speaking
so,
of,
yeah.
you mentioned slasher movies, so it made me think of what I'm in the middle of, literally right now, which is the Fear Street trilogy on Netflix. I haven't watched the third installment yet, but
I mean, I haven't seen them, but the summer camp one takes place. The camp in Georgia that Friday 13th Part 6 was shot.
that makes sense.
Uh,
That makes sense. Um,
yeah, summer
but
camp is a big part of slasher.
yeah, I mean, because I guess that's something that a lot of people can relate to, whether it be as a horror movie or just like a teenager coming of age, growing up type atmosphere as well. Like, a lot of us spent time at camps, I suppose. Um,
Yeah, I
but
was gonna say, had you like, because I never had that experience. Not that I wanted that. I never wanted to like go away as a kid.
no,
Like
I
alone.
never did. I
I
never
never
did.
wanted
I
to do
mean,
that.
my wife worked at one for a while, and I mean, I went to basketball camp. That didn't pan out, obviously.
Was
But
it like you stayed like overnight,
it
or was it
wasn't
like
overnight. No,
okay, yeah, the
it
day
was
to day
it
stuff
was
was
like a
fine.
week long. But
Yeah, but we don't get movies about day camps. You got to get the ones where you're in a bunk
yeah,
and you I don't say you lose your virginity. You may in the movie. That's what movies teach me. That's what happens at all these things. Hopefully not basketball camp, but who knows? But, yeah, the
mine
date.
was not that exciting where people were losing their virginities. I can say that for sure. It
You
was
mean during camp you didn't hear about a man landing on the moon and president being shot? No, this was not your experience.
there should be a movie made about like day camps though. That to me that would be an interesting twist. You know,
A day camp slasher movie that as long as you can go home at 3 o'clock, you're probably safe.
yeah,
But
I'm
if you
safe now that I've been picked up. So it's
yeah,
uh but anyway, the Fear Street movies are okay so far. Like I don't know how they all tie up at the end, but from what I've seen so far, it's very much an homage to the classic slasher type of film, and they're okay so far. Entertaining enough anyway. But yeah, so Before Sunrise occurred to me as we were talking here, um, and I guess that one being just the locations during the summertime really offered a lot of nice, kind of picturesque views of where they were. But I mean, that
yeah.
was just a
That's what.
conversation, so it wasn't really about the heat necessarily.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that is like a summary movie, but not too explicitly so for that reason. Because I'm literally thinking of it now, and I think like Ethan Hawke is like wearing a jacket at one point. I don't know. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
But something like some people have said like the Florida Project, which I'm like is probably summer, but it's also Florida, Central Florida, so it's going to be very hot
right.
in many seasons. So it's not something I would necessarily associate specifically with the summer.
Yeah, that's the thing. If it's not spelled out and you don't know for sure, it's kind of hard to classify it as a typical summer movie.
I
But
get, yeah, I feel like summer movies also take place in areas where there are 4 seasons. We don't get a lot of like Arizona summer movies because it's always freaking
yeah,
120 degrees. But yeah,
yeah, it reminds me of like it's a television show being Breaking Bad and taking place in New Mexico, and it's like always hot there. So
yeah, exactly. So it's like, what are seasons? We don't know.
yeah, other movies mentioned in this article: Badlands, which is a Terrence Malick classic, and quite a few movies in here that like I've never seen. Which I'm like Mystic Pizza. I never saw Mystic Pizza. I need to watch that one day, I guess. But
Yeah, it's
that'll be our next movie night, Eric.
Mystic Pizza,
Mystic
and
Pizza.
Mystic Pizza is a real pizzeria as well.
Oh yeah,
or it was. I hope it's still. Who knows how the pandemic destroyed Mystic Pizza or not? But it was at least. Yeah. But yeah, also I just wanted to, like you mentioning Breaking Bad, like thinking of TV shows, how like at least typically, maybe not anymore, TV shows seasons would begin and end almost in like our school time period. Like they would
right,
start in September and end around like Memorial Day, roughly.
right.
And so you'd often have storylines, depending on what the show was, that someone is going away for the summer,
Yeah,
and then the first episode of the next season in September, when we were all going back to school, would be about that as well. And like
yeah,
that
true.
was a clever way of playing with the schedule of television programming to also lean into the whole summer.
That's
aspect.
how Freaks and Geeks ended.
Really? Yeah.
She went she being Linda Cardellini's character in that show went away to follow the Grateful Dead on tour. That was one of the storylines that wrapped up, to follow them during the summer, which is interesting. But yeah, you're right. A lot of shows did that. Like, oh, I'm going away, so we need to separate. For
I'm saying Boy Meets World is one of my favorites. Like, and they're
yeah.
like, we're gonna go road tripping. Road tripping is a big part of summer stories a lot of times.
Yeah, Y Tu Mama Tambien is
Yeah.
a very good example of a road trip movie set in the summertime. Talking about these movies though has made me want to revisit some of them that I've already seen. Like I have the Dazed and Confused Criterion as well, and I've seen the movie before, but I need to rewatch that one at some point because that was like a prototype of so many movies like that. You take like American Graffiti and Dazed and Confused, and so many movies have tried to replicate what those movies do. But,
yeah.
Did we miss any?
I think those are pretty much the main ones. I mean,
We hit the big ones. There's so many on here that I have not seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like some you may not even associate with, like On Golden Pond is takes place
Weekend at Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernie's, yeah.
Apparently it's a summer movie. I guess it's been
they go to a beach. They're
30 years since I've seen that movie.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Streetcar Named Desire also, plays into the heat, but it's New Orleans. But yeah, I guess in the summer it's hot. It's always hot. It's very any kind of boggy swamp thing. I feel like Moonrise Kingdom is one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But,
well, let us know what we forgot to mention, and I'm sure everybody has their own favorite summer movies out there, and I'm sure I'm going to think of ones that I forgot to mention after we stop this show. But for Eric, my name is Chad. Go check out some of the movies that we mentioned. Check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Give us glowing reviews. I think we deserve them, and we will see you
for watching Space Jam. If you listen to that episode.
we do deserve a review or a 5-star review for that.
Absolutely. I don't know what season that movie takes place in, but it's not on Earth.
No, it's not. And but maybe that's a summer movie too. Who knows? Because he's going to camp.
It is the off season. Yeah.
So who knows? Why are we still talking about Space Jam? Anyway, we will see you next week.